Story 1. The Midnight Janitor. Sarah was a straight-A student at Lincoln High School in Ohio. She always stayed late to finish her projects in the art room. The building felt safe to her, even when it was almost empty. But that sense of safety was about to shatter completely. One Thursday evening in October, Sarah was working on her final painting project. The clock showed 9:30, and the hallways were dead silent. She heard footsteps echoing from the main corridor, heavy boots walking slowly across the tile floor. Sarah thought it was just the night janitor, Mr. Peterson. He was always friendly during the day, waving at students and keeping the school spotless. She went back to her painting, mixing colors on her palette, but then something strange happened. The footsteps stopped right outside her classroom door. Sarah looked up and saw a shadow blocking the light from under the door. Someone was standing there, perfectly still, not moving at all. She called out, "Mr. Peterson, is that you?" No answer came back. The shadow didn't move even an inch. Sarah's heart started beating faster. She could hear her own breathing. In the quiet room, minutes passed like hours. The shadow remained frozen in place. Sarah grabbed her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The school's thick walls always blocked cell service in certain areas. She decided to pack up her things and leave through the back exit. As she quietly gathered her supplies, she heard something that made her blood run cold. The door handle started turning very slowly. Someone was trying to get inside. Sarah backed away from the door, her hands shaking. She whispered, "Who's there?" but got no response. The handle turned all the way, and the door began to creak open, inch by inch. Through the opening, she saw a man in a janitor's uniform, but it wasn't Mr. Peterson. This person was much taller and thinner. His face was hidden in the shadows, and he just stood there staring at her. Sarah screamed and ran toward the back door. Behind her, she heard heavy footsteps chasing her down the hallway. She burst through the exit and ran all the way to her car, never looking back. The next morning, Sarah told the principal what happened. They checked the security footage, but the cameras in that hallway had mysteriously stopped working that night. Mr. Peterson confirmed he had left the building at 6 o'clock, 3 hours before Sarah saw the mysterious janitor. The police investigated, but found no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no evidence at all. They said it was probably just Sarah's imagination playing tricks on her in the empty school. But Sarah knew what she saw. She never stayed late again. And 3 weeks later, another student reported seeing the same tall figure in janitor clothes walking the halls after hours. The school installed extra security, but some students still claim to see the midnight janitor roaming the corridors. Nobody knows who he is or what he wants, but one thing is certain: he's still there, watching and waiting in the darkness of Lincoln High School. Story 2. The Group Project from Hell. At Roosevelt High School in Texas, 4 students were assigned to work together on a history project. Their names were Mike, Jessica, Amanda, and Chris. They had to research local legends and present their findings to the class. The group decided to investigate the old Blackwood Cemetery, which was located just 2 miles from their school. Local stories said the cemetery was cursed, and strange things happened to people who visited after dark. Jessica thought the stories were just made-up nonsense to scare kids. She convinced the others they should visit the cemetery at night to take photos and record videos for their presentation. It would make their project stand out from the rest. On a Friday night in November, the 4 friends met at the cemetery entrance. The rusted iron gates were chained shut, but there was a gap large enough to squeeze through. Mike brought a flashlight, and Jessica had her phone ready to record everything. The cemetery was much larger than they expected. Hundreds of old tombstones stretched out into the darkness. Some graves dated back to the 1800s, and many headstones were cracked and broken. They walked deeper into the cemetery, looking for the oldest section. That's where the most interesting stories were supposed to come from. The beam of Mike's flashlight cut through the thick fog that had started rolling in. Amanda noticed something weird about the tombstones they were passing. Many of them had the same last name, Blackwood, and most of the death dates were from the same year, 1897. She pointed this out to the others. Chris joked that maybe a plague had wiped out the whole Blackwood family, but as they kept walking, they realized it wasn't just the Blackwoods. Dozens of graves showed deaths from that same year. Something terrible had definitely happened in 1897. Jessica was recording everything on her phone when the battery suddenly died. That was strange, because she had charged it fully before leaving home. Mike's flashlight also started flickering, even though he had put in brand new batteries. They decided to head back to the entrance, but something was wrong. The path they had taken into the cemetery seemed to have disappeared. Every direction looked the same in the thick fog. The tombstones all looked identical now. Mike tried to retrace their steps, but they kept walking in circles. They passed the same broken angel statue 3 different times. The fog was getting thicker, and their voices sounded muffled and strained. Then Amanda heard something that made everyone freeze. Footsteps were approaching from somewhere in the fog. Slow, dragging steps, like someone was having trouble walking, but they couldn't see anyone in any direction. The footsteps got closer and closer. Jessica whispered for everyone to stay quiet, and still, they huddled together behind a large tombstone, trying not to make any noise. The dragging sounds circled around them as if someone was looking for them. Chris felt something brush against his shoulder. He spun around, but saw nothing except fog and darkness. Then Amanda felt cold fingers touch the back of her neck. She jumped and screamed, breaking their silence. The dragging footsteps suddenly stopped. Everything became perfectly quiet. No wind, no sounds from the nearby road, nothing at all. The silence was more terrifying than any noise could have been. That's when they saw the figures, dark shapes moving through the fog, surrounding them from all sides. The shapes looked like people, but they moved in a strange, jerky way, like they were hurt or sick. Mike shined his dying flashlight toward the nearest figure. What he saw made him drop the light completely. It was a man in old-fashioned clothes, but his face was rotting and covered with dirt. His eyes were completely black, and his mouth hung open unnaturally wide. More figures emerged from the fog, men, women, and even children, all in various states of decay. Their clothes were from a different time period, probably the late 1800s. These were the people from the graves, the ones who died in 1897. The dead surrounded the 4 teenagers, reaching out with skeletal hands. Jessica tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The ghostly figures were everywhere, blocking every escape route. Amanda closed her eyes and prayed harder than she ever had in her life. She begged for forgiveness, and promised never to disturb the dead again. The cold fingers stopped touching her, and the dragging sounds began to fade away. When she opened her eyes, the fog was lifting, the ghostly figures were gone, and she could see the cemetery entrance in the distance. Her 3 friends were lying unconscious on the ground around her, but they were breathing normally. Amanda woke the others, and they ran straight to the entrance. They didn't stop running until they reached Mike's car. None of them spoke during the drive home. They were too shocked to process what had happened. The next Monday at school, they told their teacher they couldn't complete the cemetery project. They said they had changed their minds and wanted to research something else instead. Their teacher agreed, probably sensing something was seriously wrong. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening to each member of the group. Mike's bedroom became freezing cold every night, even when the heater was running. Jessica kept finding muddy footprints in her house, even though no one had been outside. Amanda heard voices calling her name from empty rooms, and Chris saw shadowy figures watching him through his bedroom window. They all started having the same nightmare, being chased through Blackwood Cemetery by the rotting figures they had encountered. The 4 friends realized the dead had followed them home. They had disturbed something that should have been left alone, and now they were paying the price. The ghostly activity continued for months, slowly driving each of them to the edge of sanity. Eventually Amanda convinced the others to return to the cemetery. They brought flowers and apologies, begging the spirits to forgive them and leave them in peace. They promised to never disturb any cemetery again, and to always show respect for the dead. After that night, The hauntings finally stopped, but none of them were ever quite the same. They had learned that some places are meant to remain undisturbed, and some stories are more than just legend. The four friends graduated and went to different colleges, but they still keep in touch. They never talk about what happened at Blackwood Cemetery, but they all remember, and they all know that death is not always the end of someone's story. These two stories remind us that schools and teenage life can hide darker secrets than we ever imagine. Sometimes the most ordinary places become the setting for extraordinary terror, and sometimes the dead refuse to stay buried. That's all for today's episode. If you enjoyed these spine-chilling stories, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Do you have any scary school stories of your own? Share them in the comments below, but be careful. You never know who might be reading. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, not everything that happens in school makes it into the history books. Some stories are too terrifying to tell. Until